Welcome to National Open University of Nigeria, NOUN tutorial. Today we will be giving attention to Gst201 Nigerian Peoples and Culture. My name is Dan Asukwo. If you are a NOUN student or from any other universities, this will be very useful for you. Do well to share with others as well as on your study groups. If this is your first time of coming across our videos, why not do well to subscribe, like, comment, and share for others too to benefit. Today we are discussing Unit 1 titled The Peoples of Southern Nigerian and Their Culture in Pre-Colonial Times, Part 1. Contents: 1.0 Introduction, 2.0 Objectives, 3.0 Main Content, 3.1 Major Ethnic Groups of Southern Nigeria, 3.2 The Yoruba, 3. 2.1 Origins of the Yoruba, 3. 2.2 The Socio-Political Organization of the Yoruba, 3.3 The Bini, 3. 3.1 Origins of the Bini, 3. 3.2 The Socio-Political Organization of the Bini, 3.4 The Igbo, 3. 4.1 Origins of the Igbo, 3. 4.2 The Socio-Political Organization of the Igbo, 4.0 Conclusion, 5.0 Summary, 6.0 Tutor-marked assignment, 7.0 References further reading, 1.0 Introduction. Nigerian Peoples and Culture is a very interesting and exciting study. It is one of the best channels that will help you have a sound knowledge and understanding of Nigeria and its peoples, especially in pre-colonial times. These are the Yoruba, the Bini, and the Igbo. 2.0 Objectives. At end of this unit, you should be able to know who the Yoruba, know who the Bini, know who the Igbo, discuss their origins, understand their culture or way of life, understand their socio-political organization, know the similarities and dissimilarities among them. 3.0 Main Content, 3.1 Major Ethnic Groups of Southern Nigeria. We can identify among several others at least 606 major ethnic groups in southern Nigeria. These are the Yoruba, the Bini, the Igbo, the Itsekiri, the Urhobo, and the Ijaw. However, the first three are our main concern in this unit. Self-assessment exercise. Who are the major ethnic groups of southern Nigeria that, 3.2. The Yoruba. In a nutshell, the Yoruba can be described as one of the major ethnic groups in southern Nigeria. Of course, several members of the Yoruba race can be found everywhere around the globe, but the majority of them are found in some western and central states of Nigeria, stretching across Oyo, Osun, Ogun, Ondo, Lagos, Kwara, and Kogi. They practice both Islam and Christianity, but most of them are still traditionalist to the core. The Yoruba ethnic group is believed to have come into existence between 2000 to 1000 BC. Self-assessment exercise. Use your own words to describe who the Yoruba are. 3. 2.1 Origins of the Yoruba. Till today, the history of the origins of the Yoruba people remains controversial. The Yoruba as an ethnic group still holds many versions about its origins. Reverend Samuel Johnson's version. In his book History of the Yoruba, 1950, Johnson traces the origin of the Yoruba to the east. According to him, the Yoruba originally came from the northeastern area of Africa. The similarities between the cultures of the Yoruba and the Egyptians in terms of religious observances, works of arts, burial, and other traditional practices are enough evidence. It is from Egypt, after several years of journey, that the Yoruba finally settled in Ile-Ife in Nigeria. Oduduwa is believed to be the first leader that led the Yoruba to Ile-Ife and subsequently sent his sons and grandsons to found other Yoruba kingdoms. Johnson's conclusion is worth recalling. That the Yoruba came originally from the east, there cannot be the slightest doubt, as their habits, manner and customs, etc., all go to prove. With them, the east is Mecca and Mecca is the east. Having strong affinities with the east looming so largely in their imagination, everything that comes from the east with them comes from Mecca, and hence it is natural to present themselves as having hailed originally from that city. The Oyo Empire version. Oyo Empire is located in Ile-Ife. It is believed to be the center from which the world was created. In their paper, Yoruba Land up to 1800, Akinjogbin and Amp, Ayandel, 1980, give us a full picture of what Oyo Empire's version is all about. According to the legend, there was a period when the world was covered by water. The Almighty God then decided to send some of his messengers to the world, and they included Obatala or Orisa Nla or Orisa Alase as the leader, and 16 Oye immortals. They were given 5 pieces of iron, a lump of earth tied to a white piece of cloth, and a cockerel. Somewhere on their way to the world, the leader, Obatala, got drunk with palm wine. Oduduwa seized the symbol of authority from him and eventually led the party to the world. The site on which they landed is traditionally known as Oke Oramfe in Il-Ife. On arrival at the site, Oduduwa set down the 5 pieces of iron and placed the lump of earth on them. The cockerel then spread its toes on the earth. Consequently, the earth was formed, and Oduduwa thus became the ruler. It was from this base, Ife, that he extended his authorities to other Yoruba towns and villages. Now to the self-assessment exercise. The origin of the Yoruba ethnic group is still controversial. Discuss. The socio-political organization of the Yoruba. Oyo is best known as the major kingdom that eventually emerged as an empire in Yoruba land. Various traditions believe that Oyo was founded by Oranmiyan, the son of Oduduwa, who is also credited with establishing the present Benin monarchy. Oyo Empire was founded in the middle of the 15th century. A century later, it became very powerful and prosperous, extending its authority as far as Dahomey. The Alafin administration, Oyo Empire was very unique and exceptional in its system of government. For instance, in the 16th century, Oyo was one of the rare empires that had inbuilt checks and balances, and this contributed to its stability for centuries. The Alafin was the head of the empire and was resident in the capital. He was also regarded as lord of many lands. The Alafin was assisted in his administration by a retinue of officials made up of priests, officials, and eunuchs. He had a well-organized court as well. Theoretically, the Alafin was the fountain of authority and was therefore regarded as the companion of the gods. Sometimes he had an autocratic tendency, but in practice his powers were often limited and regulated by the Oyomesi, a council of 7 members headed by Bashoran, who acted as the prime minister. The members of Oyomesi were kingmakers as well. At the demise of the Alafin, they were the ones to select his successor. The Oyomesi also had the power to remove any Alafin, especially when he appeared dictatorial or transgressed the laws of the land. Usually, the deposed Alafin was expected to commit suicide. The Ogboni cult's administration. Apart from the Alafin cabinet, members of the Oyomesi cult constituted another arm of government. It was a very powerful cult. It was composed of free and prominent members of the society as well as members of the Oyomesi. The Ogboni cult had a very vital position in Yoruba society. It played a mediatory role in any conflict between the Oyomesi and the Alafin. It was a kind of counterpower to the Oyomesi as well. The army. The army was another arm of government in traditional Yoruba society. It was very organized. Its head was conferred with the coveted title of Are Ona Kankanfo. It was made up of infantry and cavalry. They Are Ona Kankanfo was expected to live outside the capital. The army was credited with performing important functions, which included stability of the empire, expansion, as well as keeping dissident territories in check. Oyo Empire also had provincial governments. They were modeled after the central government. They were administered by princes, minor kings, and bails, provincial governors. All of them were subject to the overlordship of the Alafin. The provincial governments enjoyed considerable autonomy. But the Alafin had personal agents, Ilari, all over the provinces. The Alafin used the Bere annual festival periods to acknowledge the renewal of allegiance of the provincial governors to him. Self-assessment exercise. Discuss the socio-political organization of the traditional Yoruba. 3.3. The Bini. It is obvious that the Bini, more than any other ethnic group, have played major roles in the history of Nigeria. For instance, the Bini were the first to be visited by the Europeans as early as 1472 AD. According to Hodgkin, the second half of the 15th century witnessed the arrival of the first Europeans to Benin. For instance, a Portuguese, Rui de Sequeira, arrived during Iwari's reign in 1472, while Alfonso de Aveiro arrived during Ozolua's reign in 1484. The Benin Kingdom was also the first in the west coast of Africa to exchange ambassadors with a major European power, the Portuguese. This was between 1481 and 1504. Self-assessment exercise. Who are the Bini people? 3.1 Origins of Benin Kingdom. The Egarevba's version. Just as other Nigerian peoples, the Bini have various traditions of origin. Egarevba, 1968 for instance, claims that the Bini people emigrated from Egypt and in the course of their journey southward, settled at Ile-Ife before finally arriving at their present location. Igbafe's version. Another tradition has it that the Bini peoples have been living in the area from the very beginning. According to Bini mythology, Bini was the youngest child of Osanobua, the high god. He and his brothers, who included the king of Ife, were sent to live in the world. They were asked by the high god to take whatever they wanted along with them to the world. While others chose wealth, magical skills, and material well-being, the youngest, on the advice of a bird, chose a snail shell. On arrival, they found that the world was covered by water. Following instruction from the bird, the youngest child overturned the snail shell, whereupon sand poured out of it and covered a large part of the water to form land. Thus, the first ruler of Bini became the owner of the land. Land made him powerful and wealthy, as he had to sell portions of it to his elder brothers, who then became his subjects. Ogiso's version. The first period of pre-colonial Bini history is known as the Ogiso era. This is because their rulers were the Ogisos, which means kings of the sky. The first Ogiso was known as Igbodo. He was succeeded by Er, who is credited with forming the guild system and laying solid foundation for the kingdom. Er was succeeded by Orire, who himself was succeeded by a number of Ogisos, among whom were women. The last Ogiso was Owodo. History tells us that Owodo was the one that clashed with the nobles and eventually became a victim of intrigues of his wives. This led to the banishment of his only son and heir apparent, Ekaladeran. Ekaladeran founded Ugaton, a port town in Benin. He later moved to Ife through Erua, where he spent the rest of his life. Many years later, because of a serious political crisis in Benin, the nobles sent for him to come back and rule over them. But it was too late. Ekaladeran was very old and decided to send his youngest son, Oranmiyan, Omanoyan, equal-sign pampered child, who came and established the Iweka dynasty. With the end of Ogiso dynasty, Benin went through a period of interregnum during which the elders established a form of republican government headed by Evian, who eventually attempted to usurp the throne by nominating his son Ogiaman to succeed him. However, as Evian was not an Ogiso, the Benin people rejected his son Ogiaman. This situation led to a serious political crisis in the Bini kingdom. During the crisis, two factions emerged. One, the pro-monarchy, and two, the pro-Ogiaman, also known as Republicans. This stalemate forced the elders to send a delegation to the Uni of Ife, requesting him to send somebody to Benin to rule over them. The request was granted, and Oranmiyan, one of the Uni's sons, was sent to rule the Benin people. But on his arrival to Benin Kingdom, Oranmiyan found the Bini people ungovernable. So he decided to go back to Ife. However, on his way back, history tells us that Oranmiyan had an affair with a Bini woman, the daughter of Enogi of Igo Erinmwinda. The woman became pregnant and eventually gave birth to a child who later became Iweka Wast. He is credited with establishing the present Bini dynasty. A recent version of this episode by some Bini elites maintains that Oranmiyan, who came from Ife to establish the present monarchy, was a Bini prince. According to them, Oranmiyan was the son of Ekaladeran, who had earlier been banished from Benin and who subsequently settled at Ile-Ife and eventually became the ruler, Oduduwa. Before Oranmiyan got back to Ife, he said of the Bini kingdom, "The country is a land of vexation, Ile Ibinu, and only a child born, trained and educated in the arts and mysteries of the land, could reign over the people." It was this son of Oranmiyan, born by a Bini woman who was subsequently trained and educated in the arts and mysteries of the land, that eventually ascended the throne with the name Iweka thus. Iweka I thus became the first Oba of Benin, and his dynasty still reigns in Benin till today. The overall position of the Bini elites is that although Oranmiyan came from Ile-Ife, the monarchy which he established is indigenous to the Bini because he, Oranmiyan, was the son of a Benin prince, and his son, Iweka I, was conceived, born and brought up in Benin. There is no doubt that to them, the present monarchy is indigenous to the Bini. But more research is still needed to ascertain the veracity of this version. Coincidentally, Iwika Y had a long and glorious reign. He had many children who were sent to villages as enojis. Self-assessment exercise. Discuss the origins of the Bini people. 3.2. The socio-political organization of the Bini. As earlier mentioned, the Bini kingdom was the first in the west coast of Africa to exchange ambassadors with a major European power. This was between 1481 and 1504. At that time, the Bini kingdom was already socio-politically well organized. This is what Hodgkin, 1975, who visited Benin in 1604, declared, "The town seems to be very great. When you enter into it, you go into a great broad street, not paved, which seems to be 7 to 8 times broader than the Warmo Street in Amsterdam." Bini kingdom had a unique political system which centered on the Oba. He was the head of the kingdom, and succession to the throne was by primogeniture, that is, the first surviving son succeeded his father. To Hodgkin, the Oba was not only the civil head of state, he was also the religious head as well. He was in fact regarded as a divine person who in himself summed up the whole of the race. In him dwelt the divine spirit passed on to him from his forebears. Hodgkin, 1975. The Bini society was classified into 2 distinct classes: 1. The nobility Adesotu, and 2. The commoner, Igiotu. The nobility was organized into 303 groups of title holders: the Uzama, the Egayevbo and Ogbe palace chiefs, and the Egayevbo and Ore town chiefs. The ordinary people too, most especially those within the city, were organized into a number of guilds. The guilds were professional groups of the common people. There were a number of them, such as those of the carvers, brass workers, blacksmiths, doctors, butchers, etc. These guilds, most especially those that lived in defined quarters in the kingdom, had a system of administration which was the same as that of the villages. Self-assessment exercise. Discuss the socio-political organization of the traditional Bini kingdom. 3.4. The Igbo. The Igbo people are best known for their segmentary or acephalous way of life. This is because from the ancient times they had no centralized states. Consequently, they operated a kind of government without kings. The Igbo are grouped into 5 subcultures: the Igbo of the eastern Nigeria, the Igbo of the southeastern Nigeria, the Igbo of the northeastern Nigeria, the western Igbo, and the northern Igbo. Generally, the Igbo are predominantly farmers and traders. Despite some cultural diversity among them, they do share a common basic culture in their language with a cluster of dialects that are mutually intelligible. They also share a common political system based on decentralization of power and delegation of authority exercised by the holders of the staff of authority, the OFO. Self-assessment exercise. 1. Use your own words to characterize the Igbo people. 2. How many subcultures exist in Igbo society? 3. 4.1 Origins of the Igbo. The origin of the Igbo people is as controversial as that of the Yoruba and the Bini. There are so many versions, and it is very difficult to say which is the most acceptable. The Middle East version. Some believe that the Igbo peoples migrated to their present location from either the North or the Middle East, the Igboland-centered version. Others believe that the Igbo people had been in their present abode from the beginning. Therefore, Igboland is the original homeland, the NRI version. Professor Emma Onwejogwu, 2000, regards the NRI version as the only authentic version of origin in existence in the oral tradition of the Igbo. According to NRI version, the ancestor of the Igbo, Eri, descended from the sky and sailed down the river Anambra. When he arrived at Aguleri, he met some autochthonous group of people who had no living memory of their own and settled with them. As their population increased, some groups migrated to other parts of Igboland to establish their own settlements, the Auka or Orlu version. Another tradition considered Auka or Orlu towns as the center of origin of the Igbo from where they dispersed to other areas. The Ida version. Some groups such as the Umunri claim to have migrated to their present location from Ida. The Benin version. The Onitsha and the Igbo on the other side of the river Niger, Delta Igbo, claim Benin origin. The Israeli version. One of the most popular versions of the migratory stories of origin of the Igbo people is the one that points to Israel. This assumption is based on the so-called similarities between the cultures of the Igbo and the ancient Hebrew. Some Igbo scholars consider themselves as offshoots of the lost tribes of the Hebrews who migrated southward. You should remember that the Igbo society has always been known as acephalous. Moreover, there were very limited professional historians as at that period. There were no equivalents of Oba and Alafin or of palaces over most parts of Igboland. This is why it is very difficult to reconcile all these various versions. Self-assessment exercise. 1. Discuss the Igbo origins. 2. Unlike the Yoruba and Bini, why are the versions of the origin of the Igbo more difficult to reconcile? 3. 4.2. The socio-political organization of the Igbo. Unlike other ethnic groups such as the Yoruba and the Bini, the Igbo people did not build any strong, centralized states. This is mainly because Igbo society had always been fragmentary or acephalous. In traditional Igbo, for instance, the village was the center of government. This has been described as direct democracy. The village-centered administration implied that every linkage, for instance, including all male adults in the village, participated in its political process. The Amala Oha. You should always remember that the socio-political organization of the traditional Igbo was fundamentally based either on the age grades or age and titled societies. Amala Oha was therefore a form of general assembly in traditional Igbo society. All the male adult members usually met in this assembly to perform legislative functions. In ancient times, the Amala Oha's meetings were held in the open village square. All the decisions taken during those meetings were absolute and final. As a democratic society, the life of every individual was highly respected. More so, the recognition of an individual in the society was based on individual capability and age rather than family background. The elders formed the core of village administration. They were highly respected accordingly. Hard-working and wealthy individuals were respected and given important responsibilities in the society as well. The youth, middle age, or able-bodied men and elders constituted age sets or age groups. You should remember that each age set had its own special rights, duties, obligations, and responsibilities in matters affecting the village. Self-assessment exercise. 1. What do you understand by a segmentary or acephalous society? 2. The Igbo traditional society has been described as direct democracy. Why? 4.0 Conclusion. This unit has dealt with the southern Nigeria peoples and their cultures, particularly in pre-colonial times. The Yoruba, the Bini, and the Igbo have been the main focus. It should be clear to you now that there is a kind of cultural shift from what happened to the traditional Yoruba, Bini, and Igbo to what we witness today. 5.0 Summary. In this unit, I introduced you to the southern Nigerian peoples and their cultures in pre-colonial times. I discussed and analyzed the first three major ethnic groups of the southern Nigeria, the Yoruba, the Bini, and the Igbo. Therefore, at the end of this unit, you are expected to be able to identify the Yoruba, identify the Bini, identify the Igbo, discuss the origins of these Nigerian peoples, explain their traditional culture or way of life, explain their traditional socio-political organizations, identify the similarities and dissimilarities among them, etc. 6.0 Tutor-marked assignment. 1. What do you know about the traditional Yoruba, Bini, and Igbo peoples and cultures? 2. Discuss any similarity and dissimilarity among them.